Welcome to the Pregnancy After Loss podcast. I'm your host, Shannon Henry. This podcast is a place for parents to share their stories of pregnancy after loss in hopes to help themselves and others heal and find a supportive community along the way. You can find us on Facebook and Instagram at Pregnancy After Loss Podcast. Don't forget to rate and review the show to help reach other listeners like you. Today's guest is my friend Gabby. We actually connected via social media. We've got a bunch of mutual friends, but we connected via social media really kind of because of our losses. And her story really stuck out to me. And when I decided to do this podcast, I knew that I wanted to have her on if she was willing to share her story. And she's gracious enough to come on here to share. So Gabby, I'm going to kind of just pass it off to you and let you share about your journey, about your loss and your pregnancy afterwards.
All right. So my name is Gabby. My husband and I have been together since, we've been together since 2010, married in 2015. We spent a little bit of time, just me and him, and then decided we were going to start for a baby. And it only took a little bit before I was pregnant with our first son, Gavin. He was born in August of 2017. He was the most probably uncomplicated pregnancy you would ever hear about. No morning sickness, nothing. It was a picture perfect pregnancy. And probably our whole relationship, we always joked, especially after having our first son, Gavin, that what would we do if we had twins second? How would we handle that? It was always a joke to us if we were to get pregnant with twins for our second pregnancy. We always knew we wanted 2 kids. So we always joked about that. Well, I guess February of 2019, we decided to get off the pill and just kind of see how it went. We weren't going to stress ourselves about it just yet and just kind of see how it goes. Well, lo and behold, I found I was pregnant that first month at the end of March, right after my birthday. And everything was fine. I went to my first appointment in April, and lo and behold, there were 2 little flickers on the ultrasound. As you can imagine, we were very shocked and overwhelmed, but excited at the same time. I don't think we knew what we were going to get ourselves into. We called my mom, who wasn't able to come to the appointment to us just because of the weather, and she had to stay home with our son, Gavin. So we called her and my dad, and we were, hysterically crying and happy, and they were in shock. But what kind of flipped, this was the start of a very roller coaster of a pregnancy. Because when we saw her doctor, they told us that it was more likely that these babies were what's known as mono or monochorionic. And they have the same placenta and the same sac. Which puts them at very high risk for entanglement of the umbilical cords. And if you make it to 24 weeks, you go into the hospital until they're born. So it's a very high risk twin pregnancy, even though twins are automatically high risk. So from then on, we were devastated, scared out of our minds. We didn't know what was going to happen. We were set up to go back to an ultrasound 2 weeks later. At that ultrasound, the first ultrasound I was measuring like a week behind or a week and a half behind. So they changed my due date. That next ultrasound, I had caught up a little bit. And thankfully at that ultrasound, we did see they were in 2 separate sacs, but they still were sharing a placenta, which poses its own risk. So we were grateful at that ultrasound that, we still have 2 healthy babies at this point, and they are in different sacs. So we're not as high risk as we originally were. So then after that, we kind of just prayed and hoped that this was going to continue on the way we hoped it to be. We started making plans and doing all these things, started telling a few people. And then I had another ultrasound at 13 weeks. Everything still looked great. They had caught up measurement wise to my original due date, but they kept it the same at that point. And, with twins, you go in like constantly for checks and all that stuff. My first maternal fetal medicine appointment with the high risk doctors wasn't until 16 weeks. So I didn't go until actually the first week of July. That was my first appointment. I had seen Dr. Willett, my OB, the week before. We had great heartbeats. She actually looked at them on her bedside ultrasound. I said, if you can see the gender, don't tell me, just write it down. So she wrote it down. We got home and Corey and I opened it up with my parents, and we were having twin boys. We knew they were either going to be boys or girls. They couldn't be one or the other. So we were excited. I was convinced they were girls, but we were excited to have boys because, we love our son, Gavin. So we knew it would be fun to have 3 boys around. So anyway, that following week, we went to the maternal fetal medicine doctor, and they did an ultrasound. They told us that, one measuring was 8 ounces, one was 6 ounces. So I didn't really think anything of it. The doctor came in and did some more looks at him and told us that we were being diagnosed with what's known as twin-to-twin transfer syndrome, which is basically the umbilical cord. Both of their umbilical cords attached to an area where they shared blood supply. So basically one was giving the other all of their blood supply. So one was getting not enough and one was getting way too much. But he was very, very, very hopeful that we were going to be okay. So he had set up an appointment with their high risk doctor, who was very well known. He specialized in that situation. So we had a follow appointment the next week. Unfortunately, that was a Wednesday. I think it was July 3rd. I worked the next 2 days. The 5th, I remember being at work and thinking, I haven't really felt them move a whole lot. Now, mind you, I was only 17, 18 weeks along. Most people wouldn't really feel their babies move at that gestation. But I think just because I was pregnant with twins and it wasn't my first pregnancy, I had actually felt them move for a couple weeks. So I went to work and, all day long, I was like, I haven't really felt them move. That's kind of weird. I haven't felt them move like at all. But I was too nervous to check anything at work because I'm an ER nurse. So I didn't really want to check anything at work just for fear that something was wrong. I didn't want to be told that by a coworker. And Gavin used to sleep at work when I was at work because I was on my feet all the time. So he would just kind of be less active when I was at work. So that next day, it was a Saturday, I was like, I still haven't really felt them move. I had one of my friends, Taylor, she had a fetal Doppler. I tried with that, but sometimes it's hard to find them. I just kept finding myself. I drank, a Dr. Pepper, ate something sugary, hoping that they would start moving. And they didn't. So I went in, I called Corey. I was like, I need you to come. And so we can go to the hospital. It might all be fine, but I just want to make sure and help with my anxiety. So we went to the hospital. Because you're not 21 weeks, they didn't take me to the back. They just did a triage. She couldn't find the heartbeats either. So they set me up for an ultrasound. And on that ultrasound, as soon as she put it on my belly, I knew what she was about to tell us. And that's probably like, I don't know if I just blacked out after that and just can't remember, it's just one of the hardest things to hear. And I think I just needed her to say the words out loud. I didn't want to believe it until she said the words out loud. So from there, we went to labor and delivery. Thankfully, I had one of the best doctors who was on call, Dr. Allison Boudreaux. She was so kind that she held my hand while we cried. And it was a great experience for such a horrible event, So basically after that, after delivery, we were able to spend time with them, and just kind of cry and hold them and do as much as we can. And, Women's Hospital is the best at those kinds of situations because they really do hold your hand as much as they can. But, from that point, after that loss, I think for like at least a month, I felt like I was drowning. It felt like I was treading water. I didn't know. I would wake up in the middle of the night about the time I had delivered them almost every night. I could barely, function throughout the day, and which is very hard when you have a toddler at home, So I did end up reaching out to I did end up in counseling. And I really think it helped me process all those different events leading up to that. And I know I kept telling the therapist, like, as soon as they were born, I just remember feeling like I'll never be the same. But she made the best point. You don't necessarily want to be the same. You're not the same person before you had your first son. You're not going to be the same person after you have them. And that's okay. So that really helped me to kind of accept this different person after their loss. So it took me a while to really heal and not, you're never going to accept your loss, but definitely heal enough to know that I didn't want their loss to define what our family looked like. I didn't want our loss to help not allow Gavin to have a sibling here on earth, because he deserves that. So it took us about a year before we just kind of just said the same thing. Let's see how it goes. So it took us a couple months, and I found out I was pregnant again. Unfortunately, this time when I found out I was pregnant, I also had COVID. I found out I had COVID the day before I found out I was pregnant. I just kind of took a pregnancy test thinking it'll be negative because, I'm not pregnant, and that's fine. I just want to make sure since I'm a few days from starting my cycle. And lo and behold, it was positive. Thankfully, that pregnancy, per complications, was fine. I never had any complications. But it was a very, very, very hard pregnancy after loss. I don't mentally, I think this pregnancy was harder on me mentally, which made it harder on me physically. Because you're constantly thinking about how many times have they moved today? How many, have they moved enough? What happens from here? Like you're constantly hoping, praying for that to get to your due date. And you almost wish your pregnancy away because you just are trying to get to the end goal. So I think the mental part of it definitely made it harder physically on me. And you have a 3-year-old running around. So that was a lot harder as well. But thankfully, we welcomed our rainbow baby in April, and he has been the best thing that has helped us. He definitely brought up a lot of grief I didn't think was going to happen. A lot of memories of the delivery and the hospital stay and all that stuff that happened post our twins that I didn't think was going to happen. So I had a lot of grief I had to re-deal with a little bit. And it definitely made me realize that no, Nolan, our rainbow baby, doesn't take away when we lost Lincoln and Bennett. He doesn't fill the hole, and he never needs to feel like he's a replacement for our loss. He is just an additive. He just helped us have hope again, but he doesn't fill the hole. He never needs to feel like he's a replacement. So I always want him to not feel like he was a replacement just because we lost the twins. So, but yeah, it's been a long journey.
Yes. Oh my gosh. So your story is so unique because, a lot of people that I've talked to, at least since my own loss, a lot of people have, gone through miscarriage or an early pregnancy loss. So, which, a loss is a loss, but I did wonder, and glad you brought that up, especially because I'm due to get induced tomorrow with
Yeah.
a baby. And that makes total sense that like that delivery would just stir up all of just like the sights and the smells and the sounds. And I can imagine like that would just stir up so much.
Yeah, it definitely brought up a lot of things I didn't remember about their delivery, or not that I didn't remember, but just things I hadn't like recalled in a while. So it was like I had to regrieve some of those situations.
Right. That makes total sense. I remember when for my this pregnancy, it was almost the exact same timeline. I started bleeding again, like right after, right around the same time, like same gestational age as I was when I had my miscarriage. And it was like all of those emotions, just like, and everything was fine, but like all of those emotions just stirred back up. And I was like, oh my gosh, it's happening again, and you do, like you said, pregnancy after loss almost makes you, sadly, it almost makes you wish the pregnancy away.
Yeah.
And then
You don't really want the pregnancy. You just want the end result.
Yeah.
So
Exactly.
it's hard because then even if you've had a pregnancy loss at 6 weeks, you still have in your head what could go wrong, even at 36 weeks, 30 weeks, like you're still constantly worried until you hold that baby in your arm. You're going to have constant anxiety. Absolutely. And it's something I had to deal with every day. I think I listened to his heartbeat every day from week 16 till at least maybe week 14 till at least week like 20, 22, until I could consistently feel him move constantly. I was listening to it. And even then, if I didn't feel him move a lot in an hour's time, I was pulling it out to listen.
Oh yeah, sure.
And then when I made, like you talk about, you started bleeding around the same time. When I made it to 18 weeks, which is I say 18 weeks and 3 days. That was based off my first due date, not my second. But they were measuring right at that gestation. So I say 18 weeks. But when I made it to 18 weeks, I was hysterical all day. Like,
yeah,
I just like, I don't know. I guess it was just like feeling like that same gestation as their loss. I couldn't process my emotions. And poor, like, children are just like the best at honing in on your emotions. Gavin, I think, walked in when I was crying in his room, and he just hugged me and he said, "Don't worry, mommy. It's okay. Don't worry." Oh. And I think that's what helped me get through that day, because it was hard.
Oh, that's so sweet.
Yeah.
So what has parenting after loss been like for you?
My mom and I actually talked about this recently because of Gavin adjusting to having a sibling now here. I think that after I lost Lincoln and Bennett, I clung to Gavin so much, and we probably gave him, I wouldn't say too much attention, but we clung to him like so much to save ourselves and to tread water, especially right after that. I think that's some of the reason it's been a little different for him to to realize that his attention is being divided and it's not always on him right now. He's adjusted very well, but I think because of the loss with Lincoln and Bennett, we stuck to him like glue, because we needed to save ourselves at that moment. And he was so little. He wasn't even 2 when we lost Lincoln and Bennett. Right. So he didn't really understand what was going on at that time. You could tell he knew something wasn't right, because he kind of was in tune to us, but he didn't obviously know what was going on. But yeah, I think that's what's kind of what we did after we lost him, is just clung to him so much to save ourselves and save our sanity.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes total sense. Well, yeah. I really appreciate, I know, especially just your story your story is so unique because it was, a later term loss and twins. So I know that your story is going to help someone very specific out there. And I just really appreciate you coming on and sharing your story. I know it's hard, especially you got like all these postpartum hormones that are still
Yeah.
fresh because you have a brand new baby at home. So I understand. Like I'm just so grateful that you came on to share. And if anybody wants to get in touch with you or reach out to you, where can they find you on social media?
They could probably just reach out through Facebook. That's fine.
Okay. Well, great. And I'll put your name in the show notes. So if anybody wants to reach out to you to, talk to you or just thank you for sharing your story, they can do that. So that's all I have for today. If you have anything else, feel free.
I think that's it.
All right, Gabby. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you for letting me share my story.
Thanks for tuning in to today's episode of the Pregnancy After Loss podcast. Don't forget to check out the show notes to connect to today's guest and find any resources shared in today's episode. To catch new episodes, subscribe to the show on whichever platform you listen to podcasts. Until next time.